Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're going to be doing something away from the Dark Heart of Skyrim and talk more about builds and build structure, viability, what's viable, what's not, what sets, we can even go into what sets are good, which sets are bad in a sense, but we're not going to go over every set. We're gonna talk about sets and how some sets are good and some sets are bad. But most of all, what we're going to be talking about is what is viable to play the game. Now, there is a lot of stuff that not just the devs have stated, but have clearly stated that this game is play how you want. And a lot of times that gets lost in translation by the community. Because, see, the devs don't create builds and share builds with us. What they do is they give us all the tools necessary to create the builds we want to play. And they do this by using the same math formulas we use to create builds. Determining what stats we want to play off of. Determining what sets and how those sets combo with other sets and everything like that. And what's funny is a lot of sets combo really well with each other. But nobody really takes into consideration what is viable versus what is meta. And this can cause a lot of problems. In fact, a lot of times, I don't want to say the meta can hurt a game, but it can hurt a community in a way that's not good for the game. So, what is the difference? Sorry, I gotta clear my throat. What is the difference between viability and meta? Viability is basically a build that is viable. It's a build that can complete the content you're trying to play. Whether it's doing dungeons, playing in PvP, playing in PvE Overland, solo playing, group playing. There's a lot of different things that play into viability. And it's not just sets. There's the champion point allocations, there's your attribute points and how you spin them. There's a lot of things. Is there a way to make bad builds? Totally. You can make bad builds day in and day out. But you can also make a lot of good builds day in and day out. And you can make a lot of excellent builds and phenomenal builds and builds that just fit your playstyle to such a degree that it feels way more comfortable than playing anything else. And that's where viability really plays and shines in ESO. See, sets, yes, there are good and bad sets, okay, that when put together don't give you a comprehensive or a good combination. Like, for example, taking something like, say, a set that the 2, 3, and 4 piece is health, healing received, health, and let's say the 5 piece is whenever you take damage below 30% health, you knock down all enemies around you and heal for X amount. Those types of sets, a lot of people don't see a point to in the game because you should never drop below 30% health. But the thing is that tanks do all the time. Especially when you're first starting out. So a lot of these sets, I like to call crutch sets, or as a lot of people call them, niche sets. But crutch sets are really good for the beginner who's learning to play content. And that's, and it can even be possible for somebody to make it a good set for their particular build structure. It really comes down to the play style that you play. And I know a lot of meta people are going to argue the points about what I'm saying here, but you have to understand, I'm not doing this to dismantle the meta or make fun of the meta or rip on the meta. The meta is good, and it is sound. But just because the meta is good and sound doesn't mean everyone can play at that level. And this is where a lot of other issues lie within the game. See, a lot of people will take viability or meta over viability because meta gets the superior results. But when you're playing in a group and you're learning to play through the mechanics of a dungeon or a trial for the first time, having viability over meta is going to be a lot better. And the reason for that is because you're going to have a lot of things to fall back on or crutch on that'll help you in your group complete the content in a more safer way, if you will. So you have the safe way of doing the content, or you have the meta way of doing the content. But meta, really, you have to be experienced. You have to be knowledgeable of how your build works and your character works, and the mechanics of the dungeons and trials, or even the mechanics of PvP. Because if you aren't experienced in those things, you will fail a lot. So it's either you fail a lot, and you learn from your mistakes, or you learn the content by playing something safer and something more reliable to your play style until you get comfortable. And then once you get comfortable and gain a greater understanding of it, then you can move on to more meta type play, or even into the meta. But a lot of people still won't meet that level of capability. I know a lot of people who play meta builds and they can't even get 45k DPS. And these guys are running the top end builds. And they're running DPS builds, or they're running tank builds, and they're dying constantly because they don't understand how the build works with its play style. Because the meta is just a play style. It's a build that fits a specific play style. And then you have meta builds, and then you have a meta group. So there's a lot of difference between meta group and non-meta groups. Non-meta groups might be a Templar tank instead of a DK tank, or it could be other things. But they're using the same gear that the meta's using. They're just using the Templar as a class to tank with. So the Templar has different skills and abilities that are separate from that of the DK. Are they more effective or less effective at tanking? Well, that's up for debate, and that's preference to the players and those who like chase numbers and stuff like that. That to them, the DK will always be superior. But to your average casual player, I want to play and have fun. I want to play the things I want to play, and I want to do it the most effective I can. But this isn't working for me. The meta's not working for me with my build. I need something that's going to make my build or my class more effective in its role and more effective in its play style than I'm playing it with. So you really have to understand there's a lot to this game. This game is probably one of the most simplified, dumbed down games, but it's also one of the most complicated games when it comes to the build structures. Like, I say simplified because we've only got 3 stats to worry about, and in most games you've got like this, horde of stats and all these different variables and different things you have to look at. In ESO, you've got 3 stats and like 10 other things to look at. Recoveries, your weapon damage, spell crit, weapon crit, and resistances. That's it. And your champion points. And depending on what role you play, your champion points can be set up in a multitude of different ways. So you have all this different stuff that plays into your character and plays into the design of your character, but you have to really get into the idea of, hey, this is the kind of character I want to play. I think Rich Lambert gave a very clear description of this yesterday in the live stream for Darkheart, when he said, if you want to be a mage in heavy armor using a weapon and shield, you can. Like, you can play that way, and your character can be viable for all content. The problem is that viability is a term used loosely within the community, especially the meta community. because they see viability as only the most optimal setups. And they don't understand that the average player isn't going to take the time to sit on a parse dummy for 18 hours, to master their art, the rotation. Or they're not going to sit there and run 1,000 dungeons or trials to master those to the same degree that the meta player does. That's the difference. And then another difference between meta and non-meta is time of completion. Now, me and some friends did a test on this. We made some meta builds, ran a few dungeons on PTS, and we were getting like 15-minute clears on some of the non-DLC dungeons on hard mode. Then we went in with non-meta builds, our normal builds that we play, and played through the content, and we were completing them in 22, 23 minutes. So it went from like a 7-minute difference in completion of the dungeons. Now, we didn't have enough people to do trials or test trials, but my guess is trials would come out to be about the same. And I know this from playing Asylum Sanctorium when it first came out. I ran it a lot. And a lot of times that I ran it, I was playing with pug groups. And the pug groups that I played with versus the trial group I played with, the trial group was doing the Asylum Sanctorium full clear, like killing all the bosses, not doing the hard mode, just going and learning the mechanics of each boss and everything. We were doing it in about 30 minutes, the whole trial. So 10 minutes per boss. Well, actually, it was like 5 minutes on one, 5 minutes on another, and then 20 minutes on the final one, because the final one has so much health. And that was on normal mode. And then we went in again with, I went in with pug groups, and I was completing it in like 45 minutes. So I'm going, okay, there's like a 15-minute difference. That's not really that much. So that's the thing you have to look at between average player and meta player, or casual player versus meta player, whatever you want to call it. That's the difference, is you have time of completion versus this stuff. And it doesn't require meta builds to get a good time of completion. It requires an understanding of your character, your skills, your setup, your sets that you're using, your build, and how that all combines together to make a good representation of your character. I'm going to use my character real quick to go over some of this stuff. So, like, when it comes to gear sets, this is a character I use as a tank, okay? I tank dungeons, I tank trials with it. Yes, I know it's going to seem crazy. A lot of people are going to look at this and say, what? That's like the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But let's go ahead and go over the sets. So I'm running Cellatrix, I'm running Gladiators, and I'm running Plague Doctors. Now, the reason I run this setup is because it works really good to my playstyle. The Plague Doctors gives me enough health and everything to make me a viable tank for most content. Now, depending on what content I'm doing, I'll use a sword and shield. But 90% of the time, I'm always using a two-handed. And that's because the two-handed works so well with the way this build plays. So that's why I use it. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you don't have this or this or this, that the two-handed sword and shield has these certain skills, like major fracture, major breach, and all that kind of stuff. You're right, I don't. But that's because I don't main tank. See, I off-tank. There's a big difference. When I play a dungeon, I main tank, and I'll use a sword and shield if the dungeon requires me to, and my group dynamic requires me to. A lot of times my group dynamic that I play with doesn't require me to use the sword and shield, because we already have fracture and breach coming from other sources, and with 100% uptime. In fact, sometimes even more than I can keep up. So there's that. Then on top of it, we have, I use the Gladiators because I like the fact that it gives me this increased weapon damage to my light and heavy attacks. I focus a lot on light and heavy attacks, and especially when the enemies get low on health, I start throwing a lot of light and heavy attacks. because of the fact this set gets that bonus of 1800 weapon damage to your light and heavy attacks. So you get this massive amount of weapon damage added to the character. I mean, I go to 4K weapon damage, no problem. And then I use Celotrix because this is a great CC. So it does a stun in a 4-meter radius, and it does this high burst damage. So this is a great way for me to help control adds and keep them locked in place and do damage, because it can fire off every 5.5 seconds, and then it lasts for 1.5 seconds from the beginning of the ability to when it activates. So you get this ability to fire off, and it's not hard. Like, I can get it to fire off on most encounters at least every time. So like, even on trash mobs or whatever, it's really good against trash mobs. Even in trials, because you can knock them down and then get this higher DPS. So we'll go ahead and see if we can get it to proc on this guy. Nope, he died. But like I said, it's about a 90% chance that I'll get it to proc most of the time. And when it does proc, you see this massive, like... See, just proc. Boom. They're both knocked down. And they're knocked down for 4 seconds. So it's like, I get this 4-second CC that's really good for teaching people and showing people how to play the content. But it also helps later on when it comes to, like, oh wow, I just stunned that guy right before he got to do some major hit on us and kill us. So there is that. And it works better in groups, I will admit that, because if I'm hitting more targets, I have a greater chance of it proccing. So, but that's just me. And like I said, it fits the playstyle of this character and what I do, like how I play them, since I two-handed tank most of the time. Now, a lot of people will say two-handed tanks aren't viable. They are. They're 100% viable for all content, including trials. They're not as superior to sword and shield tanking, but you know what? They can still get the content done. And it's a matter of just learning the mechanics of the encounter. If you know a boss encounter really well, you have a lot of tools you can use. You have dodge rolling, you have blocking that you can still do. Even with the two-handed, you can still block 10% of the incoming damage. And then on top of that, if you're using a lot of like self-healing and things like that, you have that higher survivability. So... But that's just me. And like I said, viability is not a... and before anyone says, oh, I want to see you tank, you know, such and such trial. Okay. And that's gonna... If I did it and I proved that I could do it, what does that prove? Nothing. Because you'll just come back with another excuse of why it sucks. And you guys do this every time. So I'm not going to get into that. But when it comes to viability, a lot of it is misconception and misleading by the meta community. And that's because they want everybody playing the meta. They want everybody playing superior builds and playing to the best they can. But they have to understand that not everyone can play to those capabilities. Not everyone can play to those standards that they try to set forth for everyone. And they also need to understand that people are going to find like-minded people to play with. They're going to find people who enjoy the game for different aspects and not just the focus of in the game. Like, I know of a guild that does nothing but overland. They don't even touch dungeons or trials in any way, shape, or form. These guys don't even run monster sets on any of their builds. And it's cool because they focus more on, like, world bosses, doing dragons, delves, public dungeons, dailies, and things like that focus on the overland and not on the dailies of dungeons. They've ran dungeons, but like they said, the dungeons are fun, but they're not necessary to play 90% of the game. Talk to another group. Does nothing but dungeons and doesn't even touch trials. Why? Because, like they said, there's no reason to do trials when the sets you can get from everything else are just as good. And they said 5% extra damage against dungeon and trial mobs is nice, but it's not needed. because you can still complete all the dungeons without it. It just adds to the time to clear. And this is where a lot of the meta versus non-meta stuff gets lost in translation, if you will. A lot of times you have a lot of the negativity coming from the meta side, and it's not the meta creators. It's not people like Alcast and Asian God and all them that are creating this. They show people the most effective ways to play, and those people run with the idea that it's the only way to play. And then those people go out in the community and start basically trash talking and treating everyone like crap because they're not playing to their standards. And that's just normal human society. I mean, you look at society now in the real world, and it's no different. You have people like that anywhere you go. I know people like that myself who try to tell me that, trying to tell me things that I do wrong in my life, but they don't understand that I'm my own person, and just like in the games, I'm my own person. I'm not here to cater to a demographic. I am here to play the game. And just like anybody else who's here to play the game, if you want to play the meta, play the meta. There's nothing stopping you. Find like-minded people to play with and go play the meta. If you want to play non-meta, go find like-minded people to play with. You want to role play, go find like-minded people to play with. You want to do whatever you want in this game, find like-minded people to play with. You want to be a solo fanatic, you can solo 90% of the game. You can solo all Overland, most of the dungeons, including DLC dungeons, if you are that good of a player and have that good of a build. Now, myself, I haven't soloed every dungeon in the game. I would say I've soloed at least 80% of them. Some of the DLC dungeons are a little bit more difficult. I have done Mazda Tune. I've soloed Mazda Tune on normal. And a lot of it is, I've soloed a lot of this stuff on normal. All the base game dungeons I'm done on normal and veteran, except for 2. And that's because they require group mechanics. And then on the DLC dungeons, I've done a few of the dungeons on normal and veteran, and most of the dungeons I can do on normal to some degree. And again, it depends on if it requires group dynamics, or more than one person to activate something or to do something. Like Fungo Grotto 2, you have to have 2 people. I think it's Fungo Grotto 2, or it's Spindle Clutch. No, it's not Spindle Clutch. It's not Fungo Grotto 2. Yeah, it is Fungo Grotto 2. But yeah, it's like you have to have 2 people to play through that content, because if you don't, you're gonna fail. And it's because like Spindle Clutch 1, I can solo. Spindle Clutch 2, I can solo better than I can solo Spindle Clutch 1, and that's because Spindle Clutch 2 is a lot easier. It's longer by a few things, but it's actually easier to solo. So. And I'm not doing this to brag. I'm doing this because a lot of times I have a lot of free time to just solo. So I spend a lot of free time, like Monday through Friday, soloing. And then on the weekends, when everyone I know who can gets on, we go do dungeons and trials together. Or we go do dungeons together to help gear up everyone. And then we'll go do trials sometimes to help people get a few sets that they might want from trials, so that they can prepare themselves for more challenging, difficult content, or if they want the sets for the purpose of moving towards the meta. So, but that's it. I mean, no matter how much people try to argue the point that the meta's right and the non-meta's right and all this kind of stuff, they're both right in their own place. The meta's right to their standards, the non-meta's right to their standards. And everyone has their freedom to choose how they want to play. You're not restricted to any one idea. And that's what I love about ESO, is you've got so many different options. Like, we've got 300 plus gear sets. We've got over 100 skill combinations. We've got pretty much almost 100 plus CP combinations and how you can set your CP. And when you take all that into consideration, and then you have 10 races, 11 or 10 races, and you have 6 classes, and you have all these different choices in how you can play each one of those in a different way. Like when people say, oh, if you're going to play stamina, you got to play stamina race. No, you can play any race you want. I play a stamina Argonian, and it works fine. Yeah, I do like 5k less DPS than say a dark elf, but I do like 2k less DPS than a high elf or a wood elf, and I do the same almost DPS as a high elf in the same setup. So it's like I just get this extra benefit of healing. And it's really cool. I mean, there is a lot of things you can do in the game that adds a new element to the way you play, depending on what race you choose, what class you choose, what gear sets, how you set your build up, and you know, like how you set your attributes, how you set your enchantments, your traits, your what Mundus stone you use, and everything else. But like I said, there is bad builds, and then there is builds that are viable, and then there is meta builds. And then there's solo builds, then there's PvP builds. There's all kinds of builds you can make in this game that are dedicated to one thing or another. Or you can make a universal build that can work in all areas comfortably. So, but that's what I love about ESO, and that's why I keep playing this game. Even though I might take breaks for 3 or 4 months at a time sometimes, I always come back to this game and get hyped and psyched and super excited when they announce something new, especially like this Dark Heart of Skyrim. I know a lot of people are upset that they didn't add a new class or skill line, but you know what? We don't need a new class and skill line every year. What I want to see them do is fix the performance of the game first before they start adding more skills and classes. And then I want to see them fine-tune those skills and classes we already have, so that way the game runs better and people have a greater understanding of how stuff works than, oh, we're changing everything constantly, like they've been doing for the last, 2 years. So I'd like to see them get done with all this other stuff first, still add content to the game because they can, and then work on adding new classes and possibly some new skill lines in the next chapter release. I like the fact that we're getting this artifact thing. It's awesome. Sounds amazing. But enough about that. This video was supposed to be about talking about viability and how things can work and builds and gear sets and all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to a lot of it, like I said, there's bad builds, there's good builds, and then there's excellent builds. Those excellent builds are those builds that work to the greater understanding of the way you play your character. And then there's meta builds, which are built and designed to be high performance builds made for people who are looking to get speed clears, and that's the way I see it. A lot of people might differ in how they see the meta. I see the meta as, hey, I want to speed clear dungeons, I want to speed clear trials, I want to have like this, whatever, and I want to skip a lot of mechanics. Like, that's what the meta is there for. I like to experience the mechanics because I like to learn how to defeat things as they're designed, because I find it a little bit more challenging to do so. And the main reason why I play a lot of these games is I like a challenge. I don't like the challenge disappearing. So having a challenge is good for people. Overcoming that challenge with your faults in your own character also makes you feel good. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys understand I'm not here to bash meta or bash non-meta or anything like that. I'm actually here to say that both sides are equal in their choices, and that as a community as a whole, we need to work together. That's it. And less complaining about stupid stuff like, oh, this guy's not playing the meta, or this guy's not playing my way. Well, guess what? You're not always going to have the people playing your way. It just doesn't work that way. So, but yeah. So, if you guys like the video, you guys know what's coming next, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe, and also click on that little notification bell. And if you do, that'll notify you when I post new videos. I try to post new videos daily, except for on the weekends. So Monday through Friday, I post new videos. Next week's going to be a little bit more focus on the new PTS stuff. So patch notes on Monday, and then going forward from there, talking about the new gear sets that are coming with the stuff. And focusing on the new dungeons and their like playthroughs and stuff like that. And then possibly, if I find it necessary, I will release some builds, but the builds will be geared towards using the stuff that drops in the dungeons. So it won't be like, oh hey, here's the new, Avenger build, because I can only release an Avenger build so many different, like, with one variation, and it's like otherwise it's gonna stay the same. So I'll be working on some builds that focus on using the new gear sets and the new monster sets. So, and that's it. And that's pretty much it. So other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.